He kissed her for a bet. She built an empire. The Black Secretary's powerful revenge. Dear sweet family, I request you from the bottom of my heart, please don't skip a single second of this story. Watch till the very end. I promise you, if you're a woman, you will feel proud of who you are and how powerful your presence is in this world. This story is not just about betrayal. It's about revenge, strength, and the beautiful rise of a queen. If this story touches your heart, please share it with your friends and family, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel for more powerful and emotional stories. Let the journey begin. The Manhattan skyline glittered like a sea of diamonds under a velvet night sky. High above the city streets, the rooftop of the Aurelia Hotel buzzed with life, laughter, and luxury. Billion-dollar deals were being toasted with aged scotch. Women in designer gowns floated like silk shadows among men in tuxedos. Champagne flowed like golden waterfalls, and jazz flirted through the air, soft and sensual. And in the center of it all stood Damian Wolfe, the man everyone wanted to be, or be with. He leaned against the marble-topped bar, swirling a glass of rare cognac, a smirk dancing on his perfectly sculpted lips. 32, strikingly handsome, with stormy grey-blue eyes and a devil-may-care grin that could melt ice, Damian wasn't just a CEO. He was a brand, a storm in an expensive suit. Every word he spoke felt like a command, and every move he made had a consequence. His charm was lethal, his heart allegedly non-existent. Surrounding him were his usual circle of billionaire brats, Landon Voss, heir to a tech empire, Carter Hayes, Wall Street's golden boy, and Zane Mercer, the notorious real estate mogul. All of them with slick smiles, dirty secrets, and the unshakable belief that the world was theirs to play with. "Tell me something, Damian," Landon said, sipping from his crystal flute. "Is there any woman out there you haven't broken yet?" Damian chuckled, the sound smooth like sin. "What's the point if they're already easy?" The group roared with laughter, oblivious to the stars above or the broken hearts below. But seriously, Carter leaned in, mischief in his eyes. "How about a little game tonight?" Damian arched a brow, intrigued. "See that girl over there?" Zane nodded toward the edge of the rooftop, where a woman stood slightly apart from the crowd. She wore a modest but elegant black dress that hugged her curves with subtle grace. Her dark, radiant skin glowed under the string lights. She wasn't laughing or trying to flirt, just quietly observing the city below, lost in her own world. "Amara Blake," Landon whispered, like a dare. "Your personal secretary, isn't she?" Damian glanced her way. His eyes narrowed slightly, not out of love, but calculation. Amara, always punctual, always professional, always graceful. She carried herself like a queen disguised as a worker bee. He had noticed her body. Yes, who wouldn't? But beyond that, he saw loyalty, integrity, dignity, traits he neither respected nor understood. "She's off limits," Damian said flatly, more out of instinct than morals. Zane grinned. "Exactly why the game's fun." Carter leaned closer. "We bet you 100 grand, cash. Kiss her, publicly, in front of everyone. You don't have to mean it. Just make it look real." Damian's smirk returned, slow and dangerous. "And if I do it? You get the cash, no strings, plus bragging rights," Landon said, tossing back his drink. For a moment, Damian didn't reply. He stared at Amara again. Something twisted inside him. Not quite guilt, more like the thrill of a new hunt. She trusted him. She respected him. She worked late for his empire without complaint. That kind of loyalty he could crush in a second. and maybe that's what made it worth doing. "Deal?" Damien said, raising his glass. Cheers erupted around him. The night just got interesting. The next morning, the mood inside Wolf Enterprises was crisp and sharp. Assistants clicked across the marble floors, executives whispered over espresso, and Amara Blake stood at her desk, organizing Damien's schedule with meticulous precision. She had no idea that she had become the center of a cruel wager. Her world was built on structure, respect, professionalism. She took pride in her work, not because she loved serving men like Damien, but because it meant she never had to need anyone. She didn't notice Damien watching her from his office window. His eyes tracked every move, the way her curls bounced when she walked, the quiet strength in her posture. She had a grace that didn't need to be loud. For a brief second, something in Damien stirred. A flicker, a whisper of hesitation. But then he remembered the money, the laughter, the bet. This wasn't about her. It was about power. He straightened his suit, smoothed his tie, and stepped out of his office. "Good morning, Miss Blake," he said smoothly. Amara looked up, startled. "Good morning, Mr. Wolf. Your first meeting is at—" "Cancel it," he said. Her brow furrowed. "Excuse me." He smiled, charming, calculated, dangerous. "Gather the entire staff in the conference hall. I have an announcement." "But now?" She nodded, unsure, typing quickly before heading off to gather the team. 15 minutes later, the entire floor gathered in the grand conference hall, glass walls, polished floors, a massive cityscape view behind them. Damien stood at the front, hands in his pockets, heart steady. Amara stood to the side, holding her tablet, trying to make sense of what was happening. And then Damien walked toward her. The room grew quiet. "I called you all here," he began, "to share something personal." Amara's heart skipped. What was happening? "I've built an empire," Damien said. "Money, success. But lately, I've realized there's more." People murmured. Amara stood frozen. "I've realized I'm in love," he said. Eyes turned to her. Her chest tightened. Damien took a step closer to her. "With the woman who stood beside me. Loyal. Beautiful. Strong." Amara blinked. Was this real? He pulled out a bouquet of red roses and handed them to her. The scent hit her like a memory. "Amara Blake," he said softly. "I want the world to know how lucky I am to have you." He leaned in and kissed her forehead, then her cheek. Then he hugged her, gently. For a second, the world disappeared. The room erupted in applause. And Amara, she couldn't breathe. The morning sun poured golden light through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Wolf Enterprises like a promise. It painted everything in warmth. The polished marble, the sleek desks, even the steel outlines of power that framed the skyline beyond. But nothing glowed quite like Amara Blake. She stood at her desk, her fingertips brushing across the petals of the crimson roses Damien had given her the day before. Their scent still lingered in the air, sweet, intoxicating, almost unreal. Her heart beat a little faster, just thinking about him. Had it really happened? The announcement, the confession, the kiss, the hug, the way he looked into her eyes like she mattered more than his money. Every woman in the office had seen it. Every man had clapped. And Amara, loyal, graceful, and grounded, was still trying to believe she wasn't caught in some beautiful hallucination. "Miss Blake," Damien's deep voice pulled her from the memory. "The executive meeting is in 10 minutes. You'll be there." She blinked. I usually don't attend board meetings, sir." He smiled, all teeth and polish. "Today, you will." Then he walked away, confident, magnetic, every inch the alpha male. But to Amara now, he seemed different. Gentle, sincere, romantic. She clutched the roses tighter. Her lips still tingled where he kissed her cheek. Her forehead still warmed from his touch. Something inside her, something deep and quiet, had bloomed overnight. Love. The executive boardroom was full. Department heads, senior managers, HR reps, legal counsel, all impeccably dressed, all focused. Tension buzzed in the air as Damien entered with his usual commanding presence. But today there was a shift, a different energy, like the room held its breath. He walked to the front of the room with deliberate steps. Everyone hushed. He scanned the faces, and his gaze lingered on Amara, who stood uncertainly near the back. She met his eyes and smiled nervously. He smiled back. "Before we begin today's agenda," Damien said, voice rich and steady, "I'd like to address something personal." A few eyebrows raised. Amara's heart jumped. "Again," Damien continued, "for years I've chased success, built towers out of ambition, turned profits into headlines, but somewhere along the way, I forgot what really matters." Silence. He stepped away from the conference table and walked across the room, straight to Amara. Every head turned, every breath caught. "I've spent years surrounded by people who wanted something from me," he said, "but she never did. She gave me loyalty when I didn't deserve it. She gave me strength when I had none. She reminded me I had a heart." Amara's pulse roared in her ears. Her fingers trembled. "Amara Blake," Damien said, holding out a fresh bouquet of roses, this one bigger, more vibrant than the last. "You are the reason I'm rediscovering what it means to feel." He handed her the bouquet. Her hands crumbled slightly as they took it. They were warm, real. She couldn't breathe. "And I don't care who knows it," he added, before gently cupping her face and leaning forward. A kiss. Not rushed, not forced. Tender. Slow. Intimate. He pressed his lips to her cheek, then her forehead, and then, lightly, to the corner of her mouth. Amara's knees nearly buckled. The room spun. Applause erupted around them. A few executives smiled, touched. Some looked surprised, but none dared question Damien Wolfe. To them, it was a moment of vulnerability, of love. To Amara, it was everything. She had never felt so seen. The meeting continued, numbers and projections and budgets, but Amara heard none of it. She sat in a daze, the roses in her lap, her eyes glassy with disbelief and wonder. Every now and then, Damien glanced at her, his eyes warm and possessive. She was floating. After the meeting, he approached her again, alone in the hallway. "Did I surprise you?" he asked, smiling like a man in love. She nodded slowly. I didn't think you noticed me like that." "Oh, I noticed you," he whispered, tucking a curl behind her ear. "Every day." Her lips parted. "Is this real?" "As real as it gets, sweetheart." Then he walked away again, leaving the scent of cedarwood and deceit behind. Amara clutched the roses to her chest and felt tears sting her eyes, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming feeling of finally being chosen. She had spent so long building walls, hiding her feelings behind professionalism. And now, this powerful man had knocked them down with a kiss. She didn't sleep that night. She didn't eat. She paced her small apartment, holding the flowers like they were oxygen. Her heart, for the first time in years, wasn't guarded. It was open, fragile, hopeful, and completely unaware of the storm that was about to come. The city outside Amara's apartment shimmered in amber and silver, but inside her quiet sanctuary, it was a world of stillness. a hush so soft even the ticking clock dared not speak, and yet her heart pounded loud, furious, hopeful, alive. She sat on the edge of her bed, barefoot, still dressed in the same navy pencil skirt and satin blouse she wore to work. Her hands trembled, still clutching the bouquet of red roses that Damien had given her just hours ago. The petals were velvety soft, their fragrance hypnotic. It wasn't just a bouquet. It was a confession, a beginning, a promise. Or so she believed. She brought one of the petals to her lips and closed her eyes, letting the memory wash over her. The way he'd looked at her in that room, the steadiness in his voice, the brush of his lips against her skin, the kiss. It hadn't been rushed. It hadn't been fake. It had felt like magic and fire, like every romance novel she'd secretly devoured at night had come to life in one soul-stealing moment. She had never let herself imagine this. Not her, not the secretary, not the woman always behind the scenes, and certainly not with Damien Wolfe, the man worshipped by boardrooms and feared by rivals. But now, she was chosen. She ran her fingers across the silk ribbon tied around the roses and whispered to herself, "He sees me." For the first time in her life, she didn't feel invisible. She placed the bouquet in a tall glass vase and set it on her bedside table. The blooms looked radiant under the moonlight, casting shadows across her wall like a lover's caress. Her skin still burned where Damien's lips had touched her cheek, her forehead, the corner of her mouth. Every kiss was a flame. She laid back against her pillows and curled her knees to her chest, holding the warmth of the moment like it was a fragile dream she feared would break if she let go. The city outside roared on, horns, sirens, life, but Amara floated above it all, cocooned in a fantasy spun by rose petals and rich cologne. Hours passed, but sleep never came. Instead, she rose. In the soft light of the kitchen, she made a cup of lavender tea, her bare feet cold against the tile. Steam curled from the mug, but she barely noticed. Her mind replayed every second with Damien, every word he spoke. "You reminded me I had a heart." She touched her chest, as if trying to feel the echo of his voice still lingering there. Amara wasn't naive. She knew men like Damien didn't fall easily. They didn't love openly. They didn't chase women like her, which made it all feel even more sacred. He had crossed that line. For her. And now she would meet him there. By dawn, Amara had made a decision. She would give him something. Not extravagant, not expensive, but something personal. A token of what bloomed in her heart. Her love had always been guarded. But now, she wanted him to know. To feel it. She opened the drawer of her desk and pulled out a small black box she had never used. Inside it, she placed a pair of silver cufflinks her late father once wore, engraved with the words, "Honor and Heart." He was the only man she'd ever trusted, and giving Damien these felt like offering him a piece of her soul. Next, she took out a note card. With shaky hands, she wrote, "You reminded me what it feels like to be seen. I don't know where this is going, but I'd walk into the unknown with you. Amara." She folded the card gently and slipped it inside the box with the cufflinks. She wrapped it in simple gold wrapping paper and tied it with a black silk ribbon. Her hands trembled. She wasn't just giving him a gift. She was giving him her heart. At sunrise, she stood before her mirror, brushing her curls until they bounced with life. She chose a burgundy dress, a little softer than her usual professional attire, but elegant, poised, feminine. Her lips shimmered with gloss, and her eyes held something new, anticipation. She took the gift box in her hands and whispered, "He'll know I mean this." Before leaving, she looked at herself one last time. There was a glow in her skin, a softness in her eyes. This was a woman in love. The subway ride felt like a dream. The morning air nipped at her skin, but she didn't mind. She held the gift close, clutching it like a secret. When she entered the towering glass doors of Wolf Enterprises, the usual chatter of co-workers, the clicking of heels, the buzz of the elevators, it all blurred. Her mind was on one thing. Damien. She rehearsed the words in her head. Maybe she'd just hand it to him quietly. Maybe she'd whisper it. Maybe, just maybe, he'd take her hand and say, "I've been waiting for this." She approached his office door. Her heart thundered. She took a breath, then another. And then she knocked. "Come in," came his voice. She opened the door and stepped into the room, radiant, vulnerable, hopeful. Damien looked up from his desk, a cold espresso beside him, his fingers tapping on his phone. He glanced at her, then at the gift. And for the briefest second, Amara swore she saw something flicker in his eyes, something unreadable. She smiled anyway. I wanted to give you something, after yesterday. What is it?" he interrupted sharply. She faltered. "It's just a small gift. Well, it's from my father, actually. And He stood up abruptly. "Amara," he said, voice colder now, "you're misunderstanding something." Her smile faded. I don't understand." He stepped forward, looking at the box in her hands like it was poison. "Whatever you thought yesterday was, it wasn't real." The gift slipped slightly in her fingers. "What?" His voice grew harsher, louder. "It was a bet. A damn joke. 100 grand for a kiss and some theatrics. That's all it was." The air died in her lungs. What are you saying?" "I kissed you because I was dared to, not because I care," he said. "Don't mistake kindness or performance for love. I don't love you. I never have." Amara's body trembled. Her knees weakened. The box fell from her hand and hit the floor with a soft thud. The silence was unbearable. And then the door to his office opened. A few staff members peeked in. Damien's voice was still echoing. "Now please, stop embarrassing yourself." Her soul shattered. Right there, in front of everyone. Her chest felt like it cracked open. He crushed the roses with his words. He crushed her. Tears welled in her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Not in front of him. Not in front of them. She stepped back slowly, picked up the box with trembling fingers, nodded silently, and walked out of his office, head high, heart in ruins. That night, there were no dreams. Only a quiet storm building inside her. A promise unspoken. One day, he will regret this. The morning had started with trembling hope, with carefully chosen lipstick and a heart fluttering like butterfly wings. Amara Blake had never worn red before. But today, she did. A rich, deep red dress that wrapped around her body like armor and blood. The color of love. The color of war. Though she didn't know yet, she would need it for both. Her heels clicked confidently across the polished marble of Wolf Enterprises. She walked like she had purpose, because she did. Clutched in her hands was a red velvet box. Inside, a gold-plated pen and a pair of custom-made cufflinks, elegant, powerful, personal, engraved with the initials DW, and beneath them the word trust. It was a gift not just of affection, but belief. A declaration from the heart. The receptionist smiled. Amara returned it. A few co-workers nodded, curious, and as she stepped into the conference room, where Damien was preparing to meet with his board, She inhaled deeply. He stood at the head of the long glass table, sleek, immaculate, devilishly handsome in a charcoal suit. His eyes flicked to her, unreadable. She smiled, heart thumping against her ribs like a trapped bird. "I have something for you," she said softly. The room quieted. A few assistants and junior managers lingered nearby, pretending to shuffle papers, but watching intently. She placed the red box gently on the polished table, sliding it toward Damien. "I wanted to thank you for yesterday, for everything." He stared at the box for a long second, his jaw ticking. And then he laughed. Not a kind laugh, not surprised, cold, sharp, cruel. The sound sliced through her like glass. "You brought me a gift," he sneered. Her smile faltered. He looked around at the staff, his voice rising, smug and mocking. She really thought I loved her. A couple of the interns chuckled awkwardly. One stifled a gasp. Amara's eyes darted around the room, confusion settling into dread. Damien opened the box with exaggerated drama, pulled out the pen and cufflinks, and scoffed. "How adorable," he said. "Matching accessories. How romantic." Amara took a step back. "Damien, He cut her off, voice like frost. "Do you know what this was, Amara? That little confession yesterday. The kiss. The roses." His grin was merciless. "It was a bet. $100,000 dab from my friends at the gala. Kiss your secretary in front of everyone." The room fell silent. "You think I'd ever fall for my secretary?" he continued, his tone dripping venom. "This wasn't a fairy tale, sweetheart. It was entertainment. For me." Her lips parted, but no words came. Her lungs refused to work. "I won the bet. That's all that happened." He reached down, and then he did the unthinkable. He dropped the red box to the floor, stepped on it, crushed it. Gold cufflinks snapped under his Italian leather shoes. The sound was deafening. Amara gasped. Around them, the staff watched with wide eyes. Some laughed nervously. Some looked away. None stepped forward. He looked her dead in the eye, voice cruelly amused. "You really thought I loved you?" The world spun. Her chest heaved. Something cracked inside her. Not just heartbreak, shame, public humiliation. A soul being stripped bare in front of those she worked beside every day. She didn't cry. Not yet. Her throat burned with unshed tears, her vision blurred, but she stood straighter for a second. Then she turned, slowly, deliberately, not a word spoken. She picked up what remained of the crushed box with trembling hands, held it against her chest, and walked out of the room. Every step felt like walking on shattered bones, down the hallway, past whispers, and past judgmental stares and silent pity. The elevator doors opened, and as they closed behind her, the first tear fell. Then another, and another. By the time she reached the lobby, her vision was a waterfall. Her body shook, but her back stayed straight. She didn't run. She didn't collapse. She walked out of Wolf Enterprises and out of that life. That night, she sat alone on her apartment floor, the red dress in a heap beside her. The roses he gave her now wilted in the vase, their petals browned, drooping like broken promises. She stared into the darkness, arms wrapped around herself. Her chest was hollow. She thought of every stolen glance, every word she had dared to hope meant something, every illusion. And then she whispered, voice broken but laced with something new. Never again. The next morning, Amara resigned via email. No explanation, no drama, just 4 words. I deserve far better. She deleted her employee profile, cleared her desk, and walked out of the office she had given years to. No goodbyes, no tears, only purpose. As the sun rose on the next chapter of her life, Amara stood by her tiny kitchen window and sipped coffee from a chipped mug. Her eyes were red. But her heart, it was changing, hardening, awakening. This wasn't the end of her story. This was the beginning. She would rise. She would rebuild. And one day, Damien Wolfe would see her again, not as his secretary, but as the woman who shattered him. The shattered heart would become the sharpest blade. The world didn't stop spinning after Amara walked out of Wolfe Enterprises, but hers did. For the first 3 days, she barely moved. The silence of her small apartment swallowed her. Once a safe haven, now it felt like a cage. Walls closing in, air thick with shame and echoes of cruel laughter. Her phone buzzed constantly. Gossip, messages, memes, whispers. But she silenced it. Deleted every social media account. Shut the world out. She didn't want to be seen. She didn't want to breathe. On the 4th day, she stood in front of her mirror. Dark circles hollowed her eyes, her face pale and puffy from crying. The red dress she'd worn that day still hung in her closet, a cruel reminder. But today, something was different. Something had cracked. No, ignited inside her. She stared at her reflection and whispered, "You let him humiliate you." But that's not the end. Not your end. Her voice broke, but it was laced with something new. Conviction. Tears fell, but they weren't of sadness anymore. They were the shedding of skin, of illusion, of the girl who had once believed in love so blindly. She walked over to her vanity, opened her jewelry box, and stared down at all the gifts she had saved, inherited, or bought over the years. Gold bangles from her mother, a sapphire necklace from her college graduation. Diamond studs she bought with her first real paycheck. One by one, she dropped them into a velvet pouch. She was done being sentimental. That same afternoon, Amara walked into a local pawn shop. Her hands shook slightly as she handed over her treasures. The man behind the counter raised a brow. "You sure about this, miss? These are real nice pieces." She nodded. "I'm sure." He wrote out a check. It wasn't a fortune, but it was enough. Enough to start something. Enough to start over. 2 weeks later, a tiny red coffee cart rolled into a buzzing corner of Midtown. Sandwiched between a tech company and a law firm, with traffic that never stopped. Its sign was hand-painted in bold black letters. Black Brew Queen, her brand, her pride, her revenge. Amara wore an apron and a bright smile. People came for the espresso, but stayed for her charm, her energy, her story that nobody knew yet, but they could feel in her grit. She woke before dawn, brewed beans in bulk, set up shop, and worked until her arms ached. Rain, cold, heat. She didn't care. Her palms blistered, her back screamed, her nails broke. But for the first time in weeks, her heart felt steady. Customers began returning, lawyers in suits, assistants who whispered, "Your coffee's better than Starbucks." Even a few familiar faces from her old office showed up, none brave enough to mention the past. They watched her. Wider smile, straight spine. And some realized, she's not broken. She's building. One evening, after a long day, Amara sat on the sidewalk beside her cart, sipping the last cup of coffee she hadn't sold. Her fingers were stained with cinnamon and espresso, but her eyes glowed. She looked up at the night sky and whispered, "You don't own me, Damien Wolfe. Not my tears, not my story, and sure as hell, not my ending." The city lights blinked back at her like stars. A week later, she used her savings to create an online page for Black Brew Queen. Photos? Menu? Her story, edited but powerful. Her words went viral. From betrayal to brood power, one woman's journey from secretary to CEO in the making. Women shared it, men admired it, investors bookmarked it, and soon interviews came. Blogs, podcasts, coffee lovers, business mentors, feminist forums. She was no longer a victim. She was a rising voice, a storm, a woman who had kissed rock bottom and used it as solid ground. She would not stop at a cart. She had bigger dreams, buildings, chains, an empire. Because Amara Blake had been shattered. But in the breaking she found the sharpest parts of herself. And now she was unbreakable. The mornings still started before sunrise. Dark sky, cold air, early buses rumbling through empty streets. But now something was different. The loneliness Amara once felt at dawn had been replaced with quiet purpose. She wheeled her coffee cart, Black Brew Queen, to the same buzzing midtown corner each day. But where there was once nervousness and doubt, now there was rhythm, routine, power. Her regulars came with sleepy eyes and crumpled bills. She greeted each of them with warmth, remembering their names, their orders, even the exact splash of almond milk Mr. Hawkins liked in his latte. Morning Queen, they started calling her. She smiled every time. Word of mouth spread like fire. One customer posted her cart online with the caption, "Best damn espresso in Manhattan and made by the baddest boss I've ever met." The post got over 10,000 likes. Then a local foodie blog featured her. Then a popular lifestyle influencer reposted her story. Traffic doubled, tripled. She sold out before noon every day for a week straight. And every time she pocketed cash, every time she deposited a day's earnings, she whispered under her breath, "This is mine. I earned this." Her marketing? Bold and unforgettable. She launched a small line of black mugs stamped in gold foil with "Brewed by a Queen." They sold out in 2 days. She started a TikTok page, sharing sassy barista moments, quick business tips, and motivational quotes. People didn't just buy coffee from her anymore. They followed her. They rooted for her. She was no longer just Amara Blake. She was becoming a brand. Within 5 months, she saved enough to rent her first actual shop. A narrow, sunlit space tucked between a florist and a nail salon. She painted the walls matte black, hung photos of the black female pioneers, and installed a neon sign in cursive, "Black Brew Queen." It became an instant hit. Lines snaked around the block. People Instagrammed their drinks. The espresso was strong, but her story was stronger. And Amara? She poured herself into every inch of that cafe. Sweat, tears, joy, fear, drive. She was the barista, the cleaner, the cashier, the CEO. One day, a woman in her 50s came in and ordered a cappuccino. She sipped, paused, smiled. "You remind me of myself 20 years ago," she said. Turned out she was a retired real estate agent with a few leftover properties downtown. "I've got a small storefront," she added casually. "Old, needs work. I'd rather give it to someone building something real." Amara blinked. "Like, sell it to me?" The woman nodded. "Cheap. You flip it, make it yours. Consider it my investment in another strong black woman's dream." Amara scraped her savings, got a loan, took the deal. She spent weekends painting, fixing plumbing, scrubbing mold. She learned to swing a hammer and argue with contractors. And when she sold it 3 months later, she doubled her money. That single deal changed everything. It sparked something new in her. Vision. She wasn't just building a coffee business anymore. She was building wealth. Legacy. A kingdom. Brick by brick. With the profit from that first flip, she opened her second cafe, this time in a high-traffic arts district, more modern, more stylish, and twice as busy. She hired her first 3 employees, all women, all overlooked by other jobs. She trained them herself, paid them fairly, treated them with the respect she was never given. "We rise together," she told them. Each night she came home exhausted, body aching, hands sore, but her heart thundered with something powerful. Not revenge, not yet, but the sweet, undeniable high of becoming something no one expected her to be. A woman who had been humiliated publicly, dismissed as weak, crushed by a man who thought she was nothing but a passing entertainment. Now, she was on her way to becoming a billionaire. And Damien Wolfe, he hadn't even noticed her return to the game. Not yet. But he would. And when he did, he wouldn't recognize the woman he once mocked, because that woman was gone. This one, she was a storm in heels, and she had only just begun. The air inside the downtown brokerage office was thick with testosterone and arrogance. Suits, cufflinks, laughter that was more smug than joyful. Men who had never heard no and never imagined a woman, especially a black woman, could compete on their turf. But then came Amara Blake. She walked into that conference room not with fear, but with fire. Silk blouse, black blazer, confidence that made the walls sit up straighter. Her curls framed her face like a crown. She was there for her first real estate auction, and they looked at her like she was lost. "Secretary?" one man sneered. "Influencer?" joked another. "Number investor," she said, eyes blazing. "Owner, soon-to-be mogul." Their laughter died in their throats. Her first property was a worn-out corner building in Harlem. The bones were good, the price was right, the risks immense, but she knew how to see potential where others saw problems. She flipped it in 90 days. A trendy cafe now stood where there had once been cracked walls and leaking pipes. Profit, $140,000. She didn't pause to celebrate. She bought 2 more. Then 4. Each time, the men rolled their eyes. Each time, she sold faster, earned more, and rose higher. They called her lucky. She called it grit. Her secret? She listened. She asked questions, took notes, learned from failures. She took online business courses at night, watched market trends during lunch breaks, talked to construction crews like equals, not clients. She walked the streets herself, scouting locations, learning neighborhoods, talking to locals. She didn't just buy buildings, she bought stories and made them profitable. Within 18 months, she owned 10 properties across Manhattan, Brooklyn, and Queens. Not rented, owned. Each one had her mark. Sleek black signage with a gold crown at the bottom corner. A Blake space. That became her signature. Coffee shops, bookstores, juice bars, hair salons. Each one was run by women, many of them black or brown. She offered them affordable leases, mentorship, marketing help. They weren't just tenants, they were queens of their own little kingdoms. Her inbox exploded with the media requests. The coffee cart queen turned real estate tycoon. How one black woman is reclaiming NYC, 1 block at a time. Blake Enterprises, built from betrayal, bound for billions, Forbes called. Then Essence. Then a viral YouTube doc titled, From Secretary to CEO, The Amara Blake Blueprint. She started speaking on panels, at universities, at women's conferences. Every time she took the stage, she opened with the same line. "I was once just a secretary, until I decided to become more." And when she said it, the room always fell silent. Of course, not everyone applauded. The real estate world didn't like being shaken by a woman who broke their rules. They called her aggressive, too ambitious, too loud, too black, too everything. She smiled, because every time they said she couldn't, she did. Inside her new penthouse office, overlooking the very skyline that used to intimidate her, hung a single-framed quote. "Power isn't given, it's taken, then built into an empire." Beneath it, a sleek plaque, Blake Enterprises CEO, Amara Blake, million-dollar woman still rising. And somewhere across the city, Damien Wolfe scrolled through his feed and paused. That face, that name. No, can't be her, he muttered. But it was, and he had no idea just how far she'd come, or how much closer she was to finally looking him in the eye again, not as his secretary, but as his equal, or his reckoning. The storm hit Damien Wolfe's company like a slow leak, quiet, unnoticeable, until it flooded everything. Investors were pulling out. The luxury tech project he'd gambled millions on had failed beta testing. Rumors of internal mismanagement made headlines. For the first time in years, Wolfe International Holdings was trembling. Damien sat in his penthouse office, swirling a glass of whiskey, jaw tight. His confidence, a once immovable pillar, was now a flickering shadow. He needed a win. A big one. That's when his assistant, Jonathan, burst in, holding a tablet. "Sir, you should see this." It was a social media ad, a stunning cinematic video featuring a model of a futuristic billion-dollar mall project in downtown Manhattan. State-of-the-art architecture, green spaces, female-led incubators. It was elegant, powerful, and dominating headlines. At the end of the video, in gold cursive, Blake Empire Mall, the future built by a queen, powered by Blake Enterprises. Damien's brows knitted. "Blake?" he echoed. The name tugged at something in his memory, but he brushed it off. "Reach out. We need in on this." His manager submitted the application. Within days, they were shortlisted for the in-person pitch. "This is our shot," Damien muttered. He dressed sharp that morning, navy suit, Rolex gleaming, that signature smirk back in place. He entered the skyscraper headquarters of Blake Enterprises. The receptionist, poised, polished, smiled politely and handed him a guest badge. "You'll be presenting directly to our CEO, Mr. Wolfe." He gave a charming nod. "Looking forward to it." But as he walked through the glass doors into the executive boardroom, he stopped cold. Breath caught, pulse skipped. Because at the head of the table, in a tailored white power suit, sat Amara Blake, poised, glowing, throned. The queen had risen. She didn't flinch, didn't smile, didn't blink. Her eyes, once soft and hopeful, now held storms. Not hate, but command. Not rage, but regal silence that screamed, "I'm not the woman you left broken." Damien tried to speak, but his throat betrayed him. He was speechless, something that had never happened to him in his entire career. She stood, graceful, controlled, deadly in elegance. "Mr. Wolfe," she said, voice velvet and iron. "Thank you for coming." She gestured to a chair. "Please, have a seat. We're eager to hear your pitch." His hands trembled slightly as he sat. Was it her perfume? The same one she wore that day? No, it was the power radiating from her. She was no longer his secretary. She was a CEO, a billionaire, a woman the world now respected. And worse, he had no idea how to even begin facing the mountain of shame rising behind his eyes. The pitch began. His team fumbled more than usual, flustered by the tension in the air. And Amara? She listened, took notes, leaned back in her chair like a queen surveying a kingdom. When they finished, she stood again. "Thank you. We'll be in touch." No reaction, no expression, just power. Damien lingered, rising slowly, the urge to say something nearly boiling over. "Amara," he whispered. She looked up, finally showing a flicker of something. Recognition? Disdain? Maybe even amusement. "Miss Blake," she corrected. "Only my friends call me Amara." And with that, she turned and walked away. Back in his car, Damien stared out the window. His chest ached in a way he didn't understand. Not because he lost a contract, but because, for the first time in his life, he realized he had lost something real, something priceless, something that wasn't built on bets, but on the purest thing he had ever faked, her love. And now she held everything, the power, the wealth, the world's respect. And worst of all, his regret. The boardroom was silent, yet the air was electric. Amara sat at the head of the long obsidian table, legs crossed gracefully, her fingers laced together over a sleek leather notebook. Her crown wasn't gold. It was presence, poise, power. Her deep brown skin glowed under the crystal chandelier, her red lipstick bold and unapologetic. Damien Wolfe stood across from her, freshly shaken. For the first time since his empire began to shake, he wasn't thinking about stocks or investors. He was thinking about her. She smiled now, just slightly, a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Mr. Wolfe," she said coolly, tilting her head. "Long time." His throat bobbed. "Amara, Miss Blake," he stammered, forcing a charming smile. "You look incredible. Success suits you." She let the compliment float in the air without grabbing it. "How the tables turn," she mused, sipping from a crystal glass. "You used to call the shots. Now you're sitting across from a woman you once crushed for fun." He tried to laugh it off. "It was a mistake, Amara. I was young, arrogant. She raised a hand. "We don't do confessions here. Only business." Then, in a voice sweet enough to chill champagne, she added, "That is, unless you'd like dinner?" He blinked. "Dinner?" "Yes. Let's make headlines. You and me, Blake and Wolfe, again. For old times' sake." Her smile widened, weaponized now. "Let's give the press something to talk about." The next day, it was everywhere. Ex-secretary to marry her billionaire boss. The Queen forgives. Amara Blake and Damien Wolfe spotted dining at Le Chaleur. Enemies to lovers. Business rivals turned romantic. Rumors swirl. The media devoured it. Paparazzi trailed them from rooftop restaurants to black tie events. He offered her his arm, and she took it, with practiced grace. Inside, Damien's heart stirred again. Somewhere beneath the games and headlines, something real was igniting. But Amara? She was focused. This was chess, not a reconciliation, a reckoning. They began appearing together in meetings, interviews, charity galas. People whispered. She's softening. He's in love with her. She's forgiven him. And Damien? He started to believe it too. He held her hand longer, brushed her cheek gently after press interviews, whispered to her at dinners, "You really are everything I never deserved." And sometimes she looked at him like maybe, just maybe, she still saw the man he could be. One evening, during a charity gala hosted in Amara's honor, he pulled her aside into the candle-lit garden. "I've changed," he said, voice thick. "You changed me. You made me want more, than money, than ego. I want you." She studied him for a long moment, then smiled. "Then prove it." His brows lifted. "How?" "Propose," she said softly, "in front of everyone, tomorrow night. I'll say yes." His heart pounded. "You'll say yes?" "Of course," she said, stepping closer. Her voice brushed his skin like silk. "You love me, don't you?" And he did. Or at least, he thought he did. But Amara, she knew better. He didn't love her. He loved the idea of her, the power she had now, the name, the empire, and she was going to make him believe he had it all, until she reminded him just how empty a man becomes when he's stripped of his mask. The next chapter would be her grand performance, the final act. She would give him back everything he gave her once. Hope, lies, a crowd. And then a heartbreak that the whole world would feel. Because the sweetest revenge wasn't cruelty. It was elegance. And Amara Blake was a master in heels. Damien Wolfe stood in front of the mirror, adjusting his diamond-studded cufflinks with a grin that hadn't touched his face in months. The rumors, the spotlight, the renewed respect in business circles. It was all back. And it was all thanks to one woman, Amara Blake. Only now, she wasn't just his secretary. She was a billionaire, an icon, the most powerful woman on the East Coast. And soon, she'd be his wife. At least, on paper. He poured a drink, walked to the balcony of his penthouse, and looked out over the city skyline. "If I marry her," he whispered with greedy satisfaction, "I get her empire." He saw it clearly. Joint holdings, merged assets, Blake Enterprises becoming a division of Wolfe International. Her name next to his on paperwork, but with him signing the real deals, he could finally reclaim everything he had lost: his reputation, the power, the throne. "She still loves me," he smirked. "Foolish girl." But Amara, she wasn't the same woman he once kissed for a bet. Number. She was now the mastermind behind the biggest emotional heist the business world had ever witnessed, and no one saw it coming. She played the perfect bride-to-be. Every time the media spotted them together, she smiled. Hand on his chest, head rested gently against his shoulder. Soft laughter, like music on her lips. She even posted subtle hints online, photos of diamond rings, captions like "found in the unlikeliest place" and "from betrayal to forever." The world swooned. Love wins after all. CEO Damien Wolfe, redeemed by romance. Amara Blake and Damien Wolfe, power couple of the year. Her inbox flooded with sponsorship offers. Wedding brands wanted to be a part of their story. Fashion designers begged to make her gown. And Damien? He reveled in the illusion. He paraded her around like a prize. Let the press romanticize their reunion. Watched his investors' confidence rise like stock arrows. Even kissed her forehead at conferences with just enough tenderness to seem sincere. Amara kept her expression soft, her voice low, her eyes dangerously unreadable. She was the flame. He, the moth. Behind the scenes, she moved like a chess master. She hired the top event planner in Manhattan, reserved the legendary Astoria Crystal Hall for their engagement gala. Invited city officials, A-list celebrities, powerful CEOs, and most importantly, every single employee from both her company and his. Every camera would be rolling, every eye would be watching. Because this wasn't just a party, it was the stage, the final act, the end and the beginning. 2 nights before the event, Damien came to her penthouse holding a custom velvet ring box. He got down on one knee under a glass chandelier, surrounded by lit candles and rose petals. "Amara Blake," he said, his voice trembling, whether from nerves or anticipation, even he couldn't tell. "Marry me." She stared at him, a long, silent pause. Then she smiled. Oh, how beautifully she smiled, and said softly, "Yes." They kissed. The press captured it in crystal clarity through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Confirmed. The billionaire wedding of the decade. She said yes. Forgiveness never looked so expensive. Damien called his lawyer the next day. "Get the prenuptial agreements ready," he said, smirking. But what he didn't know, Amara had already rewritten the script, and the contract he thought he was signing? It was only a permission slip for public execution. The ballroom of the Astoria Crystal Hall shimmered like a dream. 1,000 white roses cascaded from the ceilings. Chandeliers glowed like constellations. The media roamed like hungry wolves, cameras at the ready. Every guest, from CEOs to senators, sipped champagne and whispered about the fairy tale unfolding before them. And then she entered. Amara Blake, draped in a custom gold gown, her curves kissed by silk and power. Her afro swept into a high, elegant crown, diamond earrings twinkling like justice itself. She didn't just walk, she arrived, graceful, grounded, glorious. The room fell into reverent silence, every head turning, every flash went off like lightning. She took the stage with the calm of a woman who had seen hell and built heaven anyway. A microphone stood at the center. She touched it gently. "Thank you," she began, voice smooth and commanding, "for joining us on this special night." Guests smiled, glasses clinked. Damien stood near the stage in a perfectly tailored suit, holding a velvet ring box in one hand and a bouquet of blood-red roses in the other. His eyes gleamed. She motioned to him. "Come up, Damien," she said, voice soft. He smirked, stepping onto the stage like a man about to receive a crown. "I told you we'd be unforgettable," he whispered as he approached her. "You were right," she said, deadpan. He turned to the crowd, waving. Cameras clicked. Then he turned back to her and knelt, right there under the gold lights. "Amara Blake, will you—" Slap! The sound rang out like a shot of thunder. A handprint bloomed across his cheek. Gasps tore through the audience. Champagne flutes dropped. Cameras froze mid-flash. Even the band stopped playing. Damien staggered, blinking like he'd just been hit by a train. Because he had. Amara stood over him, fire in her eyes, her voice amplified across the room. And the world. "This is for every woman who's been treated like a joke." Silence. "For every secretary kissed as a bet. For every girl who gave her heart to a man who saw her as a game. For every 'I love you' turned into a punchline." Her voice cracked, but her spine remained steel. "You kissed me for a dare. You broke me, but I rebuilt. I built an empire from the ashes you left me in. And tonight, I don't need a ring or a man to be whole." Damien tried to speak, but nothing came out. Tears swam in his eyes, not from pain, but from shame. He looked around, faces stared back, disgust, pity, respect for her, not him. And Amara, she wasn't done. "To every woman in this room, we are not toys, not trophies, not stepping stones." She turned to the press. "Print that." And they did. Headlines exploded across the globe. "The slap heard around the world. Amara Blake's epic stand." Queen of revenge, billionaire slapped at his own engagement. From betrayed to unbreakable, Amara Blake ends the game with fire. Within hours, the video had 100 million views. Celebrities tweeted. Women posted their own stories. Where Amara trended worldwide, Damien's board resigned. Stock fell. And he? He sat in the back of a town car, roses crushed in his lap, the sting on his face, nothing compared to the one in his chest. And Amara? She walked out of the ballroom, head high, crown intact. The world didn't just know her name. They respected it. The slap was just the opening act. Now came the storm. The Astoria Crystal Hall was still caught in stunned silence as Amara stepped back to the mic. Her palm still tingled from the impact. Damien stood frozen a few feet behind her, red-faced, mouth parted, pride shattered, like the glass slipper he thought he owned. Amara inhaled. Not for courage, she already had that, but for clarity, for power, for every woman who never got the mic. "Let me tell you a story," she began, voice calm, measured. "It starts with a girl, brown-skinned, quiet, dreaming, working hard in a white glass tower where she thought loyalty would be enough." Guests held their breath. Phones streamed live. Reporters leaned in. She made coffee runs, stayed late, cleaned up her boss's messes, because that's what they said was paying dues. Her eyes found Damien's. He flinched. Then one day, that boss kissed her, told her he loved her, said he wanted to marry her. And in that moment, she believed him. Tears shimmered in her eyes but didn't fall. She went home floating, dreaming, holding roses like they were promises, only to be told the next morning, in front of her co-workers, that she was a bet, a joke, a punchline. Gasps echoed across the ballroom. Damien's head dropped, his jaw clenched. The headlines faded, but the echoes remained. Damien Wolfe sat in the shadows of his penthouse, a man stripped bare. The silence was no longer peaceful. It was punishment. The empire he'd once ruled with arrogance had become a prison made of mirrors, each reflection showing him the man he used to be. And he hated that man. For weeks he couldn't escape her voice, not her whisper, not her moans, but her speech, that fire, that truth, broadcast across every screen in the world. He watched it 100 times, each word carved into his chest like penance. He scrolled through interviews, Amara smiling with young entrepreneurs, embracing abuse survivors, speaking at colleges, becoming what he never let her be in his office, a leader, a light, a legend. His arrogance turned to acid in his stomach. He saw her strength, her elegance, and the realization hit him like a wave of concrete. He hadn't just lost her, he had destroyed her. And still, she had risen. Damien started writing. At 2 a.m. he tore through paper, searching for words he'd never used in his life. "I'm sorry. I was wrong. I didn't deserve you." By dawn, a letter lay on his desk, ink stained with shame and sincerity. He didn't sign it with his title, just his name. A week later, Amara was set to headline a sold-out Women's Empowerment Summit in Brooklyn. The venue overflowed, young girls, CEOs, mothers, fighters, all waiting to hear from the woman who turned betrayal into a billion-dollar revolution. The lights dimmed, music faded, and Amara took the stage, radiant in white. But in the corner of the crowd, unnoticed at first, stood Damien. No suit, no swagger, just a folded letter in one hand, and swollen regret in his eyes. Midway through her keynote, Amara spoke about forgiveness. "Forgiveness is not for them," she said, voice soft. "It's for us, so we're not carrying their mistakes in our bones forever." Then, a shift. Movement. Damien stepped forward. Security hesitated, but she raised her hand. Calm. He climbed the stage steps slowly. The audience gasped. Amara stood still, heart pounding. Damien didn't speak. He didn't beg. He didn't lie. He simply knelt in front of hundreds. He held out the letter, hands trembling. "Not for love," he said, voice raw. "Not for another chance, just for your forgiveness." The room held its breath. Cameras rolled, but this time he didn't care about angles, or press, or profit. He bowed his head, not to manipulate, but to atone. Amara took the letter. She didn't cry. She didn't smile. She placed a hand on his head, gently, like a blessing or a farewell. "This," she whispered, "is growth." Then she turned back to the mic. "Ladies," she said, her voice clear, "you've just witnessed something rare. Not just an apology, but the power of holding someone accountable without holding on to hate." The crowd rose to their feet. Not for Damien, but for her, for choosing peace without forgetting the pain. Later, backstage, she opened the letter. "I destroyed the one thing that could have saved me," he wrote. "And now, I know. Love without respect is just poison in a pretty bottle." She closed the note with a quiet nod, and in her heart, something heavy finally lifted. Not because he apologized, but because she didn't need it to move forward. Amara kept going, her voice rising like a battle cry. She was humiliated, but she didn't break. She didn't beg. She built applause erupted, but she held up a hand. "Not yet. You see, I wasn't just that girl. I am that girl. And I'm not standing here for revenge. I'm standing here because silence helps no one but the villain." The cameras zoomed in. "Women are not toys. We are not prizes to be won at rooftop parties. We are not weak because we cry, or fall in love, or hope." Her voice thundered through the hall. "We are forces." The crowd erupted, clapping, cheering, crying. The sound echoed like thunder across the golden walls. Guests stood to their feet. Celebrities wiped tears. Phones lit up with hearts, fire emojis, and hashtags. We're forces, we're Amara. Break the chains. Damien? He was a shadow now, swallowed by a spotlight he once commanded. His shoulders sagged, ego disintegrating. The press stopped pointing cameras at him, because he no longer mattered. The villain had been unmasked, and the world had chosen their queen. Later, Amara would walk backstage, tears finally slipping down her cheeks. Not from sorrow, but from the weight of becoming. She was no longer someone's secretary, no longer the girl waiting to be chosen. She had chosen herself, and in doing so, had set fire to every chain wrapped around her soul. The stage lights dimmed, but the energy in the room remained electric. Amara stood tall, radiant under the soft glow as Damien still knelt, his eyes red, his pride buried beneath layers of regret. She stepped forward. No makeup artist had prepared her for this moment. No script could have written what her heart was about to do. Amara bent slightly, not to lower herself, but to lift him gently. Not with hands, with grace. She looked him in the eyes. The man who once shattered her spirit, now shattered himself. And then, without a word, she embraced him. Not tightly, not romantically, but softly. Like closing the last page of a heavy book you've finally finished reading. Tears welled up in his eyes. His lips trembled. "Thank you," he whispered, voice cracking like old glass. She didn't say, "You're welcome." She didn't say, "I still love you." She didn't need to. Because forgiveness wasn't for him. It was her own release. Her own rebirth. As they stepped apart, the audience erupted in applause. Not for their reunion, but for her resilience. For the woman who had been ridiculed, rejected, and rewritten by a man, and still chose grace over vengeance. She turned back to the mic one last time. "To every woman who has ever been broken," she said, voice steady, "know this, you are not defined by someone else's cruelty. You are not your heartbreak. You are not your betrayal. You are your rise." Applause thundered. The room was soaked in tears and pride. That evening, as twilight draped New York in dusky gold, Amara stood alone on the glass balcony of her brand-new Blake Enterprises global headquarters, a sleek, breathtaking tower in Midtown Manhattan. She wore a white silk jumpsuit, hair pinned back, no diamonds, no crown. But she had never looked more like royalty. The city pulsed below her, cars, lights, skyscrapers, all once symbols of men like Damien. Now, they were symbols of her. Every floor in that building was paved with her sweat, her pain, her dreams. Her voice echoed in its walls. Her name was etched into its future. She held a glass of champagne, lifted it to the sky. To every woman who ever had to rebuild herself from ashes, she whispered, "This is your crown." The wind kissed her cheek, the stars blinked in approval, and the story ended not with a man's redemption, but with a queen's reign.